All right. Thanks for joining us on the first episode of Cannabis Quarterly. We're here with Shane Saum in Austin, Texas. And he's going to tell us a little bit about himself, his background, what he's been doing, and we're going to talk about some Texas legalization bills. What's up, dude?
Not much. Just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You want me to get a little intro?
Yeah. Tell us about your background, your experience, and why we should trust your words.
I'll give you the background about the trust, but 10 years in the Texas legislature. As you know, I went to Ohio University where we knew each other, and came here to Austin, back in probably 2013. Worked my way up through the legislature. I was a chief of staff for a senior member of the House of Representatives. Spent a few years working for the governor, helping bring jobs here to Texas. The easiest job you could possibly have, convincing companies to leave California and come to Texas. Then I was a senior advisor in the Texas Senate, again, for a senior member. Now I work in government affairs and regulatory affairs in multiple states and get to do similar related to fantasy sports and any other things that I like to work on.
So you're a lobbyist now?
Some places I lobby, some of it's just government affairs. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. Well, like you said, we do know each other from Ohio U. We were roommates sophomore year. What room were we roommates in?
Oh, man, I don't remember the room number.
I think it was 420 was the room number. Yeah.
That's convenient.
Yeah. Ironic. I think back then our spirit guides were trying to tell us something.
I think
so. Flash forward to present, let's take a look at some of the decriminalization bills and kind of the updates in Texas. So I sent you a few. I want your thoughts. We're going to get into this so people know what the process is, how long it takes, what to expect. Because a lot of people see news like, oh, Texas is going to decriminalize, but they have no clue what it takes, how long that takes, and what it has to go through to happen. So the first one we'll take a look at is in Forbes. It says, Texas lawmakers pass marijuana decriminalization bill. Texas House of Rep legislative panel this week unanimously approved a bill to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of marijuana. The measure, House Bill 218, was approved by the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee with a vote of 9-0 on Tuesday. If passed, legislation would remove penalties for the possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana or cannabis concentrate. Such possession would be reclassified as a Class C misdemeanor, a citable offense not subject to arrest and carrying a fine up to $500. So give us your thoughts. I guess it was introduced by Joe Moody, Representative Joe Moody, who's a Democrat.
Right.
And it says basically the person just ticket, goes to court, a fine, stuff like that, but there's nothing on the record, and that kind of stuff. What's the thoughts? What has to happen to that? Kind of unpack that for us if you can.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was that, oh man, the headline, this looks a little misleading again, where it says, legislators are passing a bill. To me, when I hear passing, I think it makes it through the whole process, like you talked about. There's a lot more to that than probably the general public knows. A bill gets introduced by a member, has to go through a committee, passes the committee, which is what this bill did. But then it goes to another committee, which is calendars. Calendars is the gatekeeper to get onto the House floor. It hasn't passed that yet. It's a hard hurdle to get through. Once it does that, then it's got to go to the Senate. Same process. Go to committee, then it has to make it to the floor. And then assuming there's no changes, the bill could be passed, but most likely there would be changes. And then you kind of go back to a concurrence with the House to pass that bill. So when I looked at this bill, I thought, all right, pass the House. That's a win for Representative Moody, who has been working on bills like this, as long as I've been in the legislature. So at least 10 years, he could have been working on it more.
Oh, geez.
My understanding, he's a former defense attorney, I think, or a former DA from El Paso. And so I think what he's always explained in his hearings is this came from seeing far too many cases where he's dealing with low-level drug issues and people are going to jail and they're getting bankrupt for it and it's ruining lives. And he's always been pretty adamant that is his intention, is just to remove those criminal barriers. He is the chairman of that committee, so it passing that committee is not a surprise. If a chairman's bill comes up, it'd be pretty gutsy of you on that committee to vote against it if you have any bills in that committee.
Yeah, you might not want to do that. You might be losing that committee assignment.
Guessing that any bills that you have come up may not make it.
Right.
So it's still a win for him. This is a multiple iterations of this bill every session. I think he's worked with both sides, R's and D's, and I think it's much pared down probably than what he personally really wants, but he's trying to get it passed.
Probably.
So I imagine this is the best version he's ever had of the bill in his mind, and he thinks that both sides would agree to it.
Yeah.
It's definitely win. And actually, when I first got in the legislature, I did work for a Democrat, and he was chair of this same committee. And so I do recall similar bills at that time.
So he's been trying for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it says in the Forbes article, quote, "I've been on a journey with this one," end quote. But it's basically simple, complex wording, but it's just, like you said, trying to get rid of all the criminal penalties. Like there's still, I think, $500 fine, but
yeah, just reduce it. And I think there was a part in there too where you get 6 months of basically like a probationary period. If you do everything fine, it gets completely expunged from your record. And I think that's something that appeals to a lot of the big cities here in Texas who just have a lot more criminal issues than they ever did, and they don't want to deal with these ones.
Right. Because Austin's decriminalized, but the second you get out of Austin, you're in Texas still.
Right.
And it's, state troopers, and depending on what city you go to, it's not good.
And you saw the new news here in Austin that DPS is going to help police the city, and now that's brought into question, would the state police adhere to what the city has decided on these low-level marijuana issues, or are they going to go with the stricter state penalties?
Wow. I didn't see that. Okay. Breaking, not so breaking news. Because, under current Texas state law, possession of up to 2 ounces of cannabis is a Class B misdemeanor. Possession of 2 to 4 ounces of marijuana is a Class A misdemeanor, subject to a year in county jail and a fine up to $4,000. Possession of more than 4 ounces of pot or any amount of cannabis concentrate is a felony. That's wild. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, it doesn't go far enough, you shouldn't have penalties and stuff. I agree, but, it's better than the alternative, which is nothing.
Take what you can get.
Right. What's the saying? You don't let the perfect get in the way of progress?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Says the government. The people would say the other one, but meeting in the middle is the whole point of it, right?
It is.
And this bill would also, I think, it reduces the penalties, and it says local pot decriminalization bill basically would allow local municipalities to determine their own legalization based on the cities they're in, which is interesting. I don't know how that would work, but actually this is a different one. So sorry, but moving to this one real quick. It's a new one. Texas lawmaker, also article in Forbes, introduced a bill that would allow counties and municipalities to legalize recreational marijuana at the local level. I don't know how much chance this has. It's Democratic Rep. Jessica Gonzalez of Dallas introduced this House Bill 1937, which is an interesting title because 1937 is the Marijuana Tax Act year. So, who knows if that's a little homage to that. Could be just the next, 1937s before 1938, and it could just be the next. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
How do they pick the names for those things?
Well, the number is usually, especially that high, it is just randomly given to you. So at the beginning of session, everybody piles in their bills, and as they process them, you just get assigned a number, except for the first 30 or so bills. Those are always held for like the highest priority bills. The speaker and the lieutenant governor decide those bill numbers. But maybe somebody at Leg Council saw that bill and thought it'd be creative to make that number. You never know. Right.
Yeah, you never know. But what it does, it directs the Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation to adopt all necessary rules for the administration and enforcement of the bill, including licensing, regulation, testing standards, and transportation. And adults could possess up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis under the bill. It says, under the bill, counties and municipalities in Texas will be given the authority to legalize recreational marijuana within their jurisdictions. If adopted by the local governments, the measure allows adults 21 and older to possess up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana, including not more than 15 grams of cannabis concentrate. Also allows adults to possess up to 10 ounces of cannabis at home. Interesting. Although amounts greater than 2.5 ounces would have to be stored securely. with no definition of what securely means.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in their garage in their convertible. That's securely. Anyway, regulation of cannabis businesses would occur at the state level, with the Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation responsible for adopting rules to implement the measure, etc. Impose a 10% tax on cannabis products. And that's, what are the chances of that passing? And it would have to be signed by the governor.
Yeah.
Which
my initial reaction is not a knock on the representative, but she's just not in a leadership position. She's a Democrat in a Republican-led House. She is very smart, and people respect her legal mind, but I don't think I've heard anything in committees or amongst members that they're ready to go that far. I mean, the local part of it is essentially what Austin did, right? The city council had the right to tell the police department, no, you don't need to worry about these low-level issues. The rest of it, though, gets pretty in the details, and then it goes to the Department of Licensing, which they would have to sign off on that too. They can go in this process, and I don't know which way they are on it, but an agency can go and say, I don't want to do what this bill is saying.
And then it's done.
Pretty much going to hurt you when it goes to committee. And then the governor obviously appoints the head of that agency. So if he said no, they say no, it's not going to move on. I don't know that any of that's happened. I'm just guessing. I wouldn't think that they'd be on board with it because that's a lot of work. And Moody is a Democrat as well, but he's pretty highly respected. He was Speaker pro tem for a few years in a Republican House. That shows you they really respect him. He's worked on this bill many sessions. That's why his bill has slightly better chances. Hers, I just don't see it. I don't even think it would get out of the House.
So a lot of stars would have to align for that to happen, and that's
correct. I mean, you would have to be feeling a wave right now in Texas where you're seeing legislators like, we're passing multiple marijuana bills. It doesn't seem that way. I imagine that there's just one.
Yeah. Then maybe it's an attempt to get some of these things kind of adopted into another bill. Who knows? But you mentioned, Texans in general, their mood about weed, cannabis, whatever you want to call it. And it says right here, 67% support legalizing for adult use, and an overwhelming 82% support medical cannabis. And in Texas, I don't know if many people know that number. I think that's either on par or higher than a lot of the country.
Could be. I mean, the beauty of my new job is I do travel to other states, and I do think I see a lot more openness. And it's usually, unfortunately for people, it's not what the larger population is feeling on something. It's what that population in the state house or Congress is feeling.
The power population.
Exactly. And I do think in Texas, people are more open. I think decrim is very popular amongst people in Texas for different reasons. I think if you want to split it into two parties, I don't think you have to, but if you want to talk about Democrat views, they kind of look at it more as an empathetic, like, why are we doing this to people? But even if you go to the Republican side, they're like, why are we wasting money on having to jail these people or police these people? They have other things that they're more worried about. And so you see a lot of crossover in criminal jurisprudence, and not just with marijuana, either, on a lot of things. There are two different reasons, but it gets you to the same goal.
Right.
And so I think that percentage, I bet, would be real high.
Because you have two parties, both have a legit opinion / reason why it should be either decrim or something to that extent. On the right, you have states' rights, that kind of thing, smaller government. So in theory, if you really believe that, free the plant, right? It's a plant.
Yeah.
And then on the left, Democratic side, you have equity, social justice, and the war on drugs element. Both are very important and huge. How do we come to terms with it? I don't know. I'm not the answer guy. We're just here to break down these things.
And where it's interesting probably is with medical marijuana, because that's where the two sides probably have the same reason. So when you look at, there's this crackdown on opioids, and there's all this concern about fentanyl. You have that in every state. It's really big here in Texas because of the border. And a lot of that fentanyl is coming across our border. They want to find alternatives, like, how do you stop people from overdosing from fentanyl, or how do you stop opioid addiction? Well, you find them something else that they can use to help with whatever the issue was. And a lot of people on both sides are looking to marijuana. It's mind-boggling that states still are kind of dragging their feet. Lobbies, I'm sure, have a huge part of it. But Texas is
what is it, number 2 in agriculture in the country behind Cali? Or is it?
Sounds right.
Sounds about right. Like agriculture is huge here. And you said you worked for an agriculture. I
work for rural members where agriculture is very important to their constituents.
So to put this in perspective, in Florida, where they have medical marijuana program, Florida has 700,000 patients in their medical marijuana program as of this recording and what I saw, with about 22 million citizens. Texas has 47,000 enrolled in their compassionate use program out of about 30 million people in Texas. That's a big gap to fill and room to grow as far as tax revenue, income, more importantly, health, for people on fentanyl. I know kratom's pretty big here in Texas. So medical marijuana would be a good, alternate for that. Kratom's also not regulated. But you have that gap. It's such a huge gap. 47,000 to 700,000. That's so many people.
Yeah. I have a theory on it.
What? Tell us the theory.
Again, it was back to the process, the legislative process. The reason why Florida was able to pass something larger is they have term limits. They have a much younger legislature. Their House member, I got to work in Florida. Oh. Their members, their average age is around like 30. These guys are young, and they want to move really fast because their careers are shortened.
Right.
In Texas, we don't have term limits. We meet once every 2 years. So they're slowly, incrementally passing things because these members can make whole careers of this.
It's a slow drip, like a little slow baby steps, like 1 step forward, 2 step back kind of thing. That's an interesting, I think you're right about that in the sense that, yeah, you're right. If you're in your 20s or your 30s trying to make a career, you need a significant legislative push or something like that, a win to be like, yeah, this was me.
And they're more in touch with the younger population. I think the younger population doesn't have the stigma about cannabis and marijuana, and so they don't.
Right.
There's definitely a generational gap there.
I think the average age of the United States Congress is like 57 or 59 or something high.
I would think so. The Texas Senate here is like 59.
Yeah.
The youngest person's 36.
It's probably about that. And the NBA in the new collective bargaining agreement just lifted its complete ban on cannabis. They're not going to test for it anymore. I don't believe the MLB is testing for it anymore. NFL, unfortunately for Josh Gordon,
he was tearing it up in the XFL.
Yeah, he was just ahead of his time with the cannabis stuff. But yeah, it's really. So is Congress in session? Like, when would that say that bill is going to pass? Like, when would it actually? Like, what's the time span of that happening?
In Congress?
Yeah, in state Congress. Like the Texas, this decriminalization bill.
Session ends the last day of May. So sometime right before then, the last couple of weeks. Especially like the big bills that are a little controversial like these. You see those pass at the very end because the members don't really... part of it is that's how long it takes them to rally the support and get the votes. There's a lot of work that your everyday person doesn't realize. You got to... Every committee it goes in, you got to, quote unquote, whip the votes. You got to know that you get the votes to get out of committee. You go to calendars. You got to whip those votes. Get out of the House. You got to do those. Then you have all along the process other people, probably maybe like a Representative Gonzalez who sees your bill moving and hers not. She tries to amend her bill onto your bill. You got to either fight those or get support. It takes a long time. One of the reasons the bill that does move in Texas, I think, is probably Representative Clicks. She is the author of the Compassionate Care Program.
Okay.
Every session, they usually pass one of her bills. The legislature has decided that that's your area. We trust you, and leadership likes her, and that's why hers move a little easier than others.
That would make sense.
Hers is on whatever time schedule she wants it to be on, really.
Right. And then, like you said, especially if you're like a long-standing member of Congress, you'll get more consideration up front than if you were just a rookie in Congress introducing.
Right. Just like in the larger picture where there's really only, it's weird, just few people who are really blocking these things, and they're in positions of power. In Texas, there's one guy who really controls the legislature, and that's the lieutenant governor. So he really is the one, especially this session, that's been dictating on a lot of policy areas what bills are going to come up, which ones aren't. And at the end of the day, he's the one who really knows how fast something will move or how it won't.
Right. Because right now, the compassionate use program in Texas, you can't even use smokable cannabis at all.
Right.
It has to be concentrates. It can't even be smokable, which is the way majority of people consume.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
I think her bill continues that. It doesn't make any change to that. Just adds a couple other. It started with epilepsy, but now it's gone on to. I think hers may have like ALS, and
she does want to expand the qualifying conditions, because right now you have to have pretty much a death sentence or like a really debilitating disease or ailment to get a recommendation. And the recommendation is expensive. It's like a few $100s. It's not just like Cali where it's like you telehealth in for like $25 and then they just email you your card.
I remember, because I went to San Diego State for my master's, walking around on the beach, and people literally come up to you and be like, "Hey man, do you have anxiety?" Like, who are you?
You're giving me anxiety.
And they would have a green clipboard, and like, it was my understanding I could have just went with him, signed up, and probably maybe had too many barriers to get something.
Right. Because I mean, even if they do all this stuff, we're still a long way away. Like, because even in California, when they passed legalization, it took a year for the whole thing to go through. Virginia's is still going through it. I don't even think they're just like, yeah, it's legal, but we're not working on it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like what's happening in all these.
The second half of the process that everyone forgets, as hard as it is to get a bill passed, every one of those bills usually ends with it goes to a regulatory body, and that regulatory body needs to write rules. That rulemaking process, a lot less Americans participate in that, a lot less eyes are on it. And sometimes they don't put limits on how long that can be. There's another policy area that I work in, and there's another state that passed a bill 6 years ago, and that agency has still never written rules about it.
That's insane.
I know.
Like, I think you make a good point that I really hope people kind of digest. Like, just because step one, which is a hard process in itself, getting it, okay, we've agreed, this will pass. But then you have all these other agencies that have to sign off, write the rules for that agency, like DEA and like all these, there was a recent article that says the DEA has final approval over, and it's like, no, it doesn't. They're an enforcement agency. Yeah. They enforce the rules that Congress makes that the AG interprets, or you know what I mean? So it's like all this obfuscation of it's them, it's a bunch of this.
Yeah, and there's a third step after that. They can promulgate the rules. After the bill is passed, promulgate the rules. Then it goes into implementation. Someone can get an attorney general who really doesn't like it, and all of a sudden the attorney general's office can decide, like, hey, I don't think that this fits our statute. I don't think that your rules match the bill, and that can slow it all down even more. There's always another step that can somehow mess it all up or slow it down.
Because as of now, 21 states in America have legalized cannabis, and 27 states have decriminalized the use of cannabis. In a recent study, majority of Texans supported it. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. There's a wave of like youth coming up in almost every profession. It's the long-standing tenured people still holding on, mm-hmm. like some people in Congress these days, like pass the torch, man.
I know. I know this is a state rights country. Right. So when a majority of states start passing something and Congress isn't, you start looking like, what's going on?
Right. And you're like, why is this inconsistent?
How can you one day tell me that you're representing the people, but then you look out and you see all these states that have approved it, and I don't think you're really doing what you say, but that's a politician, I guess.
Right. Now, I agree, as much as I, like cannabis and support or whatever, I do think the states, like, legally, if you reschedule it, decriminalize it, and let the states determine, that's technically in line with the Constitution.
Yep.
Like, hey, we're not gonna block it or make it illegal, but the people decide. Right. We'll decriminalize it so you won't go to jail forever. And I might have a different I don't think it'll be recreationally legal across the country anytime soon.
I don't either.
Maybe not in our lifetimes. State different. Texas, hopefully, if near future sometime, this would be a huge step. But I've got a little theory too. I mean, since Texas is so big on agriculture, that it's like they're going to have to transition, crops, or if they're not going to do livestock anymore, they got to buy all new equipment. It's a huge investment to, so and hemp and cannabis isn't very expensive right now. Like it's as dirt cheap as you can get it. Oregon has a surplus, Cali, Washington, they have surpluses because the customer base is not expanding. The supply base locally is expanding in those areas, but they're not, that's why Canada has they have a bunch of weed, but they don't have the people, and they can't export it. So this new NAFTA, which is Mexico, Canada, America, Mexico has approved legalization to help with the cartels and kind of all that stuff. Canada has done it a long time ago, and their government actually grows it and runs the shops kind of like a liquor store, like those little places. But my theory is they're waiting for the consumer base to come online, which is America.
Yeah.
And I mean, how that's going to happen, I don't know, but I don't think it'll, with a split Congress and, Joe Biden being Joe Biden, I don't know if that would be in line with what he just said he did, which he really didn't do anything.
Yeah. The president is interesting to me because that has always been my understanding that the president, through an executive order, could ask the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to reschedule all this, but no one's done it. I mean, the current president has a vice president. When she was a candidate, was running on, I would, support legalization or decriminalization, some iteration of that. And then there's been no movement.
And then Tulsi Gabbard smoked her in the in the debates when she brought up her marijuana record as the AG in Cali. Kamala Harris had evidence and basically kept those people in jail by holding the evidence. Anyway, not to go down that rabbit hole, but Trump could have done it too for business purposes. True. He didn't do it. Obama could have done it for social purposes. Yeah. He didn't. It's interesting because it's been a front and center policy topic for a long time now. I'm starting to feel old. Yeah. And all three of those presidents have had a majority at some point in their, Joe Biden had it for a minute, Trump had it for a year or two, and Obama had it for his first 2 years. They could have made sweeping changes, or at least, like you said, executive order, decriminalized across the country. Yeah. But instead he did this, I'm going to let everybody out of federal prison for sole marijuana possession, which there was nobody fit that bill. Right, because it's usually used to tag on to your sentence, right? It's an add-on, and it's one that they plea out of, right? It's like, hey, we'll keep this one, you drop that. It's like a little, like you said, it's an additive. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I think it's a good progress. It's good progress. It's it's always good. I was just telling you before we got started today, right? I had to go to 3 capitals this week, and one of them I was in Kentucky the day that they actually, I think it was an overturned veto to legalize. Yes. Yeah, to legalize medical marijuana there, and everyone in the building was pretty happy about it, both sides. There were other bills that they were more concerned about. That one was like an afterthought, but they were pretty excited about it. The governor signed it within almost 12 hours of it passing. Mitch McConnell's probably like, it might be. And that was in North Carolina, same thing. They're super excited about it. And they're like, we're going to pass such and such. Oh, we're going to pass medical marijuana too. You see, it seems to be, at least the medical side of it, much more open. So there's progress happening. More and more states are doing it. It'd be interesting to see how things move nationally. Because a lot of those states that are starting to move it now, like you said, they're heavy opioid states. Kentucky, Virginia, that kind of Midwest Rust Belt where we grew up, up in Ohio near the Appalachians. There's a lot of that there. What's interesting is I've been seeing, not only do they put a medical marijuana program in, because I think once it becomes decriminalized legally and the government starts passing out tons of research and development grants. As a state, you can't get that money unless you have a medical marijuana program. So these states are kind of going, hey, we can get some, a few $100,000 or $1 million, couple million or whatever for our medical marijuana expansion. We just have to, kind of like Texas, they have one, but it's like no one can, do it. So it's kind of like there is one, but there really isn't.
Yeah. I buy the argument that you basically are helping get the structure going with medical. And then if it ever goes more than that, you already have all the vendors, you already have everybody. So
that's the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like the baseline infrastructure. And I think that's what they're doing is because, and it's interesting because this rep named the bill 1937. Schumer, I believe the last couple of years has introduced the Safe Banking Act on like 420 in the Senate. Like,
so creative.
I know, right? Like, well done, Mr. Grandpa.
Right.
It's like, hey kids, you see the name of the bill?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, dude, like just do it. We don't care.
Why did you waste probably like 2 weeks on that?
Right. That's right. They probably had all their aides and they're like, we should call 420.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is what I think personally. I think they should federally legalize it, use all the tax revenue to fix the roads and bridges across America and call it Operation Pothole.
I think that'd be popular.
That's just my opinion.
I'm a fan.
So I know North Carolina's big on it. South Carolina actually a Republican introduced a medical marijuana bill. Like a lot of these states, they're getting drilled with fentanyl, they're getting drilled with opioids, and there's no. Yeah, we could go on forever about there's no reason why, but I think what your point is really right. They're figuring out how to distribute it because a lot of these, like North Carolina, actually, I went to Tennessee as well. When I was in Nashville, talked to a guy on like the liquor commission, and he said, I want it sold in the liquor stores, and because he wants, the money, and I said, you can do what you want, but the only thing I am adamant about is home grow. It's like as long as you can grow one plant or two plants at home, that's the whole point of legalization. To me, there's no point of legalizing it if you still can't buy it at home. It's like illegal to collect rainwater. You're like, what? I didn't know you own the sky and the ground. Oh, yeah. Damn, I got to pay to breathe now. Which who knows? But so yeah, dude, I don't know what else Texas can do. I know Abbott's not going to executive order anything.
No, I feel like he has loosened up on it, though, his opinion on it.
Has he?
Think he speaks as harshly about it as I have in the past. He's kind of opened up to a number of things as he's preparing to run for president or preparing for post-governor's life. I think some people think this could be his last term. We'll see. But I don't know that he necessarily as big of a barrier as he maybe once was.
And that's what's interesting when you say that because it's like, when has a presidential candidate, I don't even remember if Obama did, but when has they come out? Like, I know Biden said, I'm for legalization. I mean, we know that's a lie, Yeah. And DeSantis is actually not pro cannabis at all.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see where these new candidates stand on it because it seems like a chance to steal the baton, right, from the liberals. If a Republican's just like, hey, states' rights, like if you want to legalize it, I'm not going to stand in your way.
You don't even have to stand on an island and say like, I'm here to support medical marijuana. You can just simply say, I'm here for state rights. That includes things like marijuana, and interstate alcohol sales, and other things like that.
Anything that we're currently talking about, like, the hot button issues, so it's all these little, and the issues we're talking about, important, but like these are actually tangible. Like look what Colorado did with all their tax revenue and all that stuff, and we could use a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, what's tough in Texas is we have this session where we have a historic $50 billion surplus that they have to spend, which is the highest they've ever had. So what Texas has kind of told people is like, I'm not really concerned about what brings me more revenue right now, but that could be a little short-sighted. We just happen to be having that because there was so much oil and gas sales going on in the last couple of years as we got over the shutdown. They're going to need revenue in the future.
Right.
I don't see how you can ever shy away from it.
Right.
Especially when you look at Colorado, you have a great case study.
Mm-hmm.
And if other states start really excelling at it, and a state like Texas that prides itself on being number one for business or number one in everything, I don't think that they will sit by that long and just lose out on all that money.
And since they have their own energy grid, I don't think the energy would be a problem. To grow greenhouses and like all that stuff. I don't see that being a problem because they can carbon capture and they can stack it up and get the tax credits from the government.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of hemp. Like growing hemp is it's a clean green crop. So you capture the CO2, sell it back, get the tax credits.
You know better than I would. I haven't watched it at all, but since Texas had legalized some of the hemp stuff, I don't know how it's been doing, but it's been at least 2 years, so they gotta start having some numbers.
I mean, you would think I don't know too much about what we have Delta 8 and like Delta 10 and like all that stuff. We sell hemp derived Delta 9, 8, and 10, but it's got to be under 0.1%, and then.
I have a funny story about that too.
Yeah.
I told you, like, Florida, a lot younger. Like, we went to Florida for the legislature for different reasons, and went to this event that had legislators at it. It was kind of like a campaign thing, but they're all Republicans. And as we left, there was these 3 bowls sitting out, and it was just filled with Delta 8 and 10 and THC and cannabis. These packets they're just little packets, individual ones, like as a go home thing. They were gone in like 30 seconds. She's like, oh yeah, when the members see these things, they just grab them in handfuls.
Right. It's like trick or treat again. It's just like trick or treating.
Yeah. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, because that's like D8, D10, D9, they're all cannabinoids in the plant, but they all have different functions. They're all similar, just a little different. D9 is what everybody knows is what is weed, like gets you high. Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol is the real name, but you can't do any synthetic additions. So they just banned HHC, like THCO, like some other stuff that's not organically derived from the plant, because technically, if it's not found in the plant, how can you say it's like from the plant? It's like, no, you're synthetically creating it and spraying it on. So that's
using logic, though.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again.
Yeah.
So we just had to pull some stuff off the shelf and that thing. But I think they're trying to, in my opinion, they're trying to get, like you say, what you can't do first, and then you kind of incrementally say, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, as people kind of demand and ask for it.
Yeah, it's a forever process. Like you brought up before too, it's like once you pass one of the iterations and move on, now you start talking about, well, where can you sell it? Oh, can I have it at a truck stop? Can I have it where you sell liquor? That's just a never-ending battle that we do with other policy areas.
Does Texas have like a statewide liquor store? No, it's just all okay. Because I know North Carolina has them, the ABC liquor stores, which is that's what I was telling the guy in Nashville. I was like, in California, where I'm from, lived for 8 years.
I never heard that.
That you've made fun of multiple times, but I won't bring that up.
You should get a tattoo about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll think about it. Maybe it'd be on my back somewhere.
Yeah.
Just in case I move or something.
Good idea.
But in California, you can't sell. It has to be in a dispensary. Like weed, cannabis has to be in a dispensary. It can't be in a liquor store. Like they can do like the Delta 8s and like all that stuff. And it's got to be tested and like all that stuff. So, how many businesses are going to come to Texas? And it was interesting because I worked for a testing lab in LA, and there were a bunch of oil people from Texas going there. And I told them, I was like, you guys got to go back. Like, it's about to start in Texas. Here, it's like saturated. There's tons of people. Everybody's got relationships with the labs and all that stuff. Not to mention, once you open a lab, you have to formulate all those processes. No one's going to just give them to you. You got to do it on your own and all that stuff. And so eventually, I would hope that they would take. This is what I told the lab that I think that they should do, and especially federally, I think eventually they'll do, is take the top 5 labs from the state, right? Get their procedures and marry them, right? And say, this is protocol. Like, you have to do this. This is a statewide pass. Because it's just like organic certified, right? It's like, I'm certified organic here, but not here, and it's like, and then eventually each state would say, okay, here's our processes and then marry them with the 50 states for legally.
Again,
That would take 20 years. Right. That would logically take 20 years to do that. And I'll be long gone. You know, it probably wouldn't happen in our lifetime if all that stuff happened.
Maybe.
But we can only smoke and hope, right?
That's right.
But that's about it. I don't have anything else unless you want to add some stuff we didn't bring up.
That's it. I mean, it's at this point, you're just watching the states as they go through their legislature. Texas has another couple of months, so we'll see what passes and what doesn't, and see if I was right on my prediction.
When does the session end?
May 31st.
Okay. So we got 2 months.
Yeah.
See what happens. And
next to the bills we talked about today, the movie bills and calendars has been there for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So remember, that's just the gatekeeper to get into the House floor. So we'll wait and see how that vote goes out. I think that'll be telling.
Sweet. Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, tell everybody, I guess, where they can find you if you want on Instagram or LinkedIn or
yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Shane Saum, Saum.
Right. You want some?
That's what I used to say in college, yeah.
You said it like 20 minutes ago. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Shane. We'll talk. He'll be back. So anytime these things happen, we're going to call you, and you'll be our in-house political advisor.
Happy to do it.
Unpaid.
What?
Thanks.